Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. This is our second CCC debate, and my name is Chuck Hines. I'm proud president of the East Cambridge Planning Team. I'm also treasurer of the Cambridge Citizens Coalition, i.e. PAC. That's the state's version of a super PAC. This year's event is being co-hosted by multiple groups. The Cambridge Citizens Coalition, which formed by a number of neighborhood group leaders across the city, Cambridge Voters for Good Government, Cambridge Streets for All, Indivisible Cambridge, as well as the East Cambridge Planning Team, the Harvard Square Neighborhood Association, and the Mid-Cambridge Neighborhood Association. I will be the timekeeper on this event. I note Dr. Peter Sue may have to leave at the break due to work obligations. It is my honor to welcome back Carrie Costello, the president of the League of Women Voters of Boston, as our event moderator. Welcome back, Carrie. Thank you for joining us. Take it away. Kelly?
You're muted.
We can't hear you, Kelly.
I've unmuted. Am I now on?
Yep, we can hear you.
My
Go ahead.
apologies. Someone should make a t-shirt about that, unmute, make some money. Hi, I'm happy to be here once again. This is, I guess, my second annual foray into being a facilitator for this forum for City Council, and I'm pleased to be able to help. As president of Boston League of Women Voters, we also represent what we call our Cambridge unit. Cambridge used to have its own league, but it no longer does. So we do have a significant group of members who live in Cambridge, but they are part of the Boston League, just so those of you who are candidates can see what that alliance is within the league itself. We don't just represent Boston. The league is a nonpartisan group. We do not get involved in endorsing candidates at any level, local, state, or national at any time. Our mission is voter education and advocacy. And our motto, if you will, is voting is not a spectator sport. It requires participation. And so today I'm pleased to be here to help you present your candidacies in this forum to the citizens of Cambridge. At this point, I am going to introduce the candidates, and I would, although everyone's name is certainly on my screen, I would ask that people just raise their hand when I call their name. We think everyone is here. I apologize in advance if I have any mispronunciation. I did practice, but please correct me if I misspeak. It's important to say people's names properly. And again, it is not in alphabetical order. John Hanratty, Joe McGurk, Dan Totten, Adrian Klein. This says Reverend Walker. I know we weren't going to use titles, but Vernon Walker. Frederico Muchnick. Okay. Patty Nolan. Peter Sue. Carrie Pasquarello. Doug Brown. Kathy Zuzzi. Robert Winters, Paul Toner, Aisha Wilson, Joan Pickett, and I'm going to apologize in advance. Is it Hao Wang? Correct? Okay, thank you. All right. So we are going to have different time limits for each set of questions. And as we go through, I will announce ahead of time the time, how much time you have. Some questions will be as short as perhaps 15 seconds because they may be a yes or a no. Others could be 30 to 60 seconds, depending upon the type of question that's being asked. I will say it once and then I will go around. We have established a random order for each question, not alphabetical, but again, to make it as fair as possible. That is how we will proceed. Are there any questions? Okay, and I will call time when your time is up. And if you do happen to keep going, the mic will be shut off, so keep that in mind. We're trying to be as fair as possible, but also to make as much use of the time that we have together as possible, which is difficult with this many candidates, but we will do our best. So I will start off with question 1. The topic is fiscal responsibility and how the city finances itself. Cambridge has enjoyed steady growth in tax revenue for the last 20 years. What happens when the rate of growth in commercial tax revenue slows? How could you manage with slower growth? Are there areas you think we could better manage or cut as a city? What 2 policy areas would you prioritize saving if that became necessary? This is a 30-second question, and we will start with Patty Nolan.
Okay, it is true that as much as we have lots and lots of money right now, the downturn across the region is stunning. Boston already had a major building that just sold for 30% less or 15% less than it did just a few years ago. Our commercial tax base may well go down. The question is mostly about areas to cut. One thing I have focused on is we continue to outspend our peers in our building costs. We are spending 40% more per student on our school building costs for no reason, the same net zero, the same area building. I think that is something we need to go, and we can look very seriously about programs that are not delivering.
Time. Thank you. Vernon Walker.
Yes, I think we should do a full wide scale review of programs that are not meeting standards as what they are expected. For instance, if we are not, if our out of school programs are not effectively doing what they're supposed to do, then I think we should look at ameliorating that. I think we should also examine where our funds are going related to the climate crisis. Mm-hmm.
Time. Peter?
I think we should, I agree. I think we should take a look at all the costs of everything. And then I would say, you know, to the portions that are probably we're spending the most, we can probably have room to go down the most. I would say probably healthcare aspect, depending on how efficient we can get, and then also commercial development.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
Yeah, great. So first of all, I think the police budget is really high and we keep giving it a reflexive increase. I think we could lower that. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of unspent revenue in the bank. I think we should spend more of it on low-income people in our city. We have some of the lowest property taxes of anywhere in the state, which most people find unbelievable. And we pay down those taxes with $20 million in additional free cash every year. So I don't think we have a problem. I think we just need to think about how to allocate our resources differently towards the most vulnerable.
Thank you. Paul?
Thank you. I would start by, first of all, the city manager is the one that sets the budget and decides on the budget. We get to vote on the final budget numbers and have some input into the budget over the course of time of the year. First thing I do, I was asked every single department head to do a review of their budget and analyze what they would be cutting or what they feel they would cut if we had to. And we should be doing a return on investment of all the different programs that we have now rather than waiting until there's a crisis.
Thank you. Carrie?
Yeah, so managing slow growth starts by identifying and reviewing cutting waste, setting priorities, and also identifying strategies to stimulate new growth. So this can go into lean management, making sure that we understand what can be cut because of key performance indicators. Also make sure that we're prioritizing the essential services needed for our community, the infrastructure. But once again, the diversification of revenue sources, we have to look to ways to increase our development.
Time. Thank you. Joan?
Hello, thank you. I think that every policy that gets put before the city council needs to have a financial component to it. So we're looking at it up front. And the council understands what the implications of our policies are from a financial perspective. And then I think we do need to do an ongoing review of how certain programs are performing. We want to make sure our money is being spent effectively, and I think we need to have that type of monitoring in place to ensure that we're getting value for our tax dollars.
Thank you. Ho?
Yes, I think we should balance our budget every year, all the time. Whenever there's a push to shove, we should use the two most non-performing projects that we should release the money to balance our budget. The two non-performing projects could be anything, anytime that calls for transparency of project performance and close monitoring.
Okay, thank you. Aisha?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Apologies for my late arrival. I would be really looking for an audit of our city budget to make sure that we are actually doing what we intend to do as a city. So really and truly, we need to be setting priorities and setting up outcomes, like thinking strategically about what we want our term to look like, the next year to look like, and really working towards that. So really working with each department head to identify what those goals are for the year, for the next 2 years, and really setting a budget that will deliver on some outcomes for the whole community.
Thank you. Federico?
Yes, hello, thank you. So I'm not sure that managing slower growth is important. I'm not sure that slower growth is necessarily a bad thing in the short term. I do know that we leave about $20 million on the table every year, that we only tax about 68% of our tax base, and that for approximately the price of 1 cup of coffee a week, that's $150 a year. If we were to up taxes that amount, we could make up to $20 million a year. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, time. Kathy?
Hi, I was really relieved in the fiscal 24 budget that the city council goals were outlined along with financial amounts. So I'm glad that we're thinking in terms of how much we're spending and what our priorities are. I agree with others that I would meet with department heads to review budgets if it looked like we were going to have less money. It's very important we keep our AAA bond rating because we owe $600 million and we've got to pay it back.
Okay, thank you. Adrienne?
Thank you. I do agree with what many of my panelists have said. I think we really need to make a plan for a long-term budget to anticipate any dips in funding moving forward. So we need to be careful with spending now and keep a reserve. So we want to just carefully evaluate our ongoing costs and understand a financial component breakdown of what our immediate costs are and what our long-term financial commitments are in order to be able to answer this question.
Time. Thank you. John?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think that there's been many good ideas here already spoken for. I think that each of our programs need to have goals, and we need to evaluate them against the goals, and that would include a budget. You need to look at the budget and say, are we performing what we should be doing? And we should be doing that on an ongoing basis, not just because of a crisis coming. We should be spending our taxpayer monies well and smartly and getting the most for it.
Time. Thank you. Robert?
Hi there. I think what I would principally say is that we need to maintain our basic functioning of city government, and not necessarily all the optional things that we take on, even if we have to suspend things for a year or so in order to get through a crisis. We could dip into some of the free cash, but generally speaking, I think it's important to maintain our excess levy capacity and to not spend down the free cash too radically. My biggest concern right now is actually that with commercial tax abatements on the horizon, we may actually see a shift toward the residential, and that may hurt a lot.
Okay, thank you all. Okay, next question, which concerns the environment.
Do I get to answer?
Oh,
Doug,
that's on my list. Your name must maybe missing?
no, you skipped out by accident.
I apologize, Joe.
No
I
problem,
crossed
Terry.
them
I'll
out as
keep
I
it
went.
short. I'll keep
Okay,
it short.
sorry.
I would love to see more attention paid to our per unit cost for new affordable developments. I'm concerned that we're not getting enough units for our dollar. As far as an area I would want to preserve, I have 3 small kids. I really want to preserve our education spending.
Okay, well, thank you. You had some time to spare, but we don't give credit for the next question. The next question.
Also,
was-
Mr. McGurk didn't get a chance.
Thank you, Patty.
I thought I just did. Who just spoke then?
Doug Brown.
Doug Brown? Okay, sorry. I'll
I'll be quick. Most
No,
of the,
you have your time. You don't have to rush.
Thanks. I think that most of the things have been said of good ideas already. I would say that I would be interested in protecting, as Dan Totten said, our most vulnerable. As Robert said, we have to keep our essential services. And one of these things that's essential is making sure that our lower and middle income folks are able to remain in our city.
Okay, thank you. Time. Have I covered everyone?
Yes.
I've just gone ahead and double checked the next question and everyone's.
I'll let you know, Carrie, if you skip somebody.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Our next question is regarding the environment. Every respondent will have 1 minute for a response. Many are worried about tree canopy loss for many reasons, including heat island impacts and related health and environmental inequities. How will you work to retain and expand the tree canopy, especially in neighborhoods already bearing the brunt of heat island impact? What would you do to better integrate climate concern with current policies? And on this one, we will start with Carrie.
1 minute.
Great. Thank you so much for this question. First of all, we want to stay green and clean and safer for our environment. So I think coming up with some ideas of targeted tree planting, making sure that we're fostering a community that wants to bring green into our community, the community engagement is so important. Let's see, incentives for property owners. I think this would be a really great thing to incorporate. Also, making sure that we integrate climate concerns into our policies with climate impact assessments. I think this is a really great way to bring people along with us as we're trying to get more green. So these assessments could evaluate the potential environment and climate related consequences, but also add risk mitigation measures to make sure that everything we're doing in our community, we're making a better environment for all. And I'd say my top 3 issues to really take on with canopy
time. Okay. Thank you. Aisha?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. I would definitely be looking to evaluate, assess kind of the tree canopy of what we have currently and what neighborhoods are really truly at risk, the environmental justice communities, and making sure that we protect them and build more in those neighborhoods. I think initially I've been doing a lot of work as a North Cambridge girl. I've been doing a lot of work with the Jerry's Pond folks, and I would be looking to really build out better tree canopy and infrastructure there for that North Cambridge Range Avenue neighborhood. I would also be looking more so down the port as well as keeping areas like Memorial Drive and others safe and protected. But I do believe that it is important to do an assessment to understand exactly where we are falling short and where we do have a robust tree canopy shade infrastructure. So just really making sure that we pick up in the areas where we're falling short.
Time. Next, John.
Yes, I think in order to build out a tree canopy, we need to make it a priority, a higher priority than it is. Part of the problem is some of the trees are dying on us when we put them in. So I would like to get to the bottom of that. Why do we plant trees and they're dying on our streets? I think that the other part of this is space. I mean, we don't really have park space or space, and we need to make a concerted effort open some space, more open space for people. It's healthy, etc. We're talking about taller buildings now. We should also be talking out space that would augment that and complement that with trees and space for people to move around, those types of things. And I like the idea of also incentivizing landowners, owners of houses and apartments to plant trees.
Thank you, John. Joan.
Thank you. First, we need to protect the tree canopy that we have. So we need to ensure that the infrastructure is there to support that. I think everyone knows about the problem with the Dennehy Park irrigation system that happened. That should never have happened. We need to protect the tree canopy we have. We should not be cutting down trees as part of some of our projects. And we need to understand if trees are being removed, healthy trees, if they're being removed as part of a project, why? Everything should be done to preserve healthy, mature trees. I think as far as policy is concerned, we're looking at what's affectionately known as AHO2, which is going to increase density, not have any setbacks, and possibly eliminate green space. Somehow these things cannot coexist. If we truly want to maintain tree canopy and have enough tree canopy, we need to make sure our policies, such as our affordable housing, are allowing that to be accomplished.
Thank you. Paul?
Thank you. A lot of the things I've already said, but namely protecting and preserving what we have now, identifying areas that we can plant more trees. For instance, just in my neighborhood alone, there's a patch of DCR land that I think if we call DCR to see if we can plant some trees there, I'm sure the neighbors would appreciate it and it would give us a bit more of a canopy. I will just say that I'm all for preserving and protecting the canopy, but I have to be completely honest and upfront. If there is a major project that would require having a tree removed, yes, I agree with Joan that there have to be very good reasons for it, but I would remove the tree and just, plant more trees somewhere else to make up for it. But that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Adrian?
Hi, thanks for the question. And to my fellow panelists, I think that have raised really good ideas. One of the things that I support is planting more trees on public lands that we do have and incentivizing planting on private land, which is something that Carrie mentioned. So agree with that. We also have a mini forest here in Cambridge. I think that we could plan to have others of those in other parks around the city. And again, evaluate, like Aisha said, which neighborhoods are most affected by this and focus our attention on those areas to both incentivize planting on private property in those areas as well as in public lands.
Thank you. Frederico?
Yes, so hello. Yeah, from what I understand, the city of Cambridge plants about 1,000 trees a year. I don't think we're doing too badly on that, although it's always good to have more. I believe that with regard to the canopy, this has to be looked at on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis with particular focus, for example, on the port, which I think needs a lot more open spaces and canopies than, for example, my neck of the woods up here in Porter Square. So I would also, I'm kind of split between what I hear a couple of people saying, the tree canopy. I would advocate not building above the tree canopy. I think the tree canopy itself, the height, nicely aligns with the classic 3-decker structure of Cambridge. Having said that, I understand that tall buildings might need to come to the main corridors in one way or another, but there. Finally, I thought it was a minute.
It was a minute.
It was a minute. Just look at my screen. It has the timer on it. I'll let you know.
In fact, it's always a few seconds. I don't react immediately, but we're doing our best with that. Robert?
Well, one thing I think it needs to be pointed out right away is that a lot of the older trees have just been aging out. So we went through a period where there was a fair amount of die-off of trees. I think the city's been doing a pretty damn good job lately of putting in new street trees. But one of the things I think we need to do more regularly is to do a better job at doing the planting of street trees. some of the major corridors where they've done some of these projects, they actually put in dry wells and structural soils that allow for much more extensive root growth. It's a sad thing to see a very new, recently planted tree just dying out because it simply wasn't given the means of survival. And in fact, much of the city is sort of sealed over with both streets, sidewalks, and whatever in such a way that water can't even get to the root systems, even after a big rainstorm. These are basic things that need to be done. Last thing I want to just say here is that in terms of private property, I think it's important to maintain tree canopy, but also to maintain some right of property owners to actually manage their properties.
Time. Doug?
Yeah, I was the co-chair of the Climate Resilient Zoning Task Force, and I think that's an initial attempt in the right direction, which is it gives incentives for new development to preserve existing trees and also to add green space in their permitting process. So I'm hoping we can continue with that. I think regarding specifically the issue of trees, we're not doing enough right now with what we have. And I would start by just filling every existing tree well that's empty or has a stump in it with a tree. I think within view of where I'm sitting right now, I can point out 4 of them. And so I think not only that, but what we're planting is inferior grade trees. We're planting 1-inch trees that die at a 40 or 50% rate in the first year. So I think we need to plant better trees, and we need to plant them in the places that they've already been planted in the past.
Thank you. Wow.
Great. My name's Hao.
Thank you for correcting. Okay.
Great. Thank you. My fellow panelists already mentioned a lot of good ideas. I wanted to say that the city did a great job around Fresh Pond. I've been there very often. I actually would advise most of the viewer today go to Fresh Pond. You can see year after year, we did a great job around Fresh Pond. We should do it everywhere else. Just today, my friend and I just passing through the Memorial Drive, we were admiring all the trees beside Kennedy School and one particular tree is out of the MIT building. So all above, I just, as an engineer, I like us to think out of box. We need to have a good accounting of our trees. And we need to look for new engineering solutions to convert impervious surfaces to grassland. And cool roof technology. Thank you.
Kathy?
Hi. So I've been involved in planting trees at Magazine Beach Park. The city gave us 10 trees that the Charles River Conservancy watered, and the Charles River Conservancy's care for those trees, and now the city's care, has made all the difference. So I would just sort of build on what Robert said. The trees have to be planted well, and they must be watered. And every day I walk along the river in the morning, and DCR has just replaced so many of the dead trees along Memorial Drive, but they're already like dead because they weren't planted well. The roots were all bundled and tight, and they weren't loosened up. So they weren't planted well. So if a tree isn't planted well, and if it doesn't have access to water, it's not going to live. So I think we really need to focus more on like monitoring contractors planting trees, and then making sure that they're watered regularly. We also should make sure that they're native trees, and we should be, be thinking about climate change and the temperature changing. Yeah.
Vernon?
Yes. So we know that environmental justice is racial justice. And we also know that because of the crisis that we're in, that extreme heat is both deadly, dangerous, and disastrous. I think that what we should do at the city is look at the port, and we should look at Alewife, and we should look at how we can prioritize and maximize safety by not only planting trees, but also incentivizing what's known as the Cambridge Urban Forest Friends. Again, that's the Cambridge Urban Forest Friends, which is a program that incentivizes neighbor and residents to adopt a tree near where they live so they can water it in a sense. And we know that more droughts are coming. I think that we should strengthen and put some funding behind that program where we can have neighborhood captains to be able to, and neighborhood coordinators to be able to ensure that neighbors that want to participate in that program help to protect those trees, because we know that trees make a difference. And we know that trees is a great way to combat the urban heat island impact, which we are going to continue to experience with extreme heat. So that's one thing that I would propose that we would do.
Time, thank you. Patty?
Wow, everybody said a lot. We all know this, but I always start, and we have to start with the fact that caring for trees is a public health issue also. It is an environmental justice issue, and it creates something in the city that's, we cannot forget about the impact on people's health overall. It's not just nice to have. I would say thank you to the advocates across the years. We do have an urban forest master plan. If you haven't looked at it, look at it. It is a really in-depth plan to do exactly so much of what everyone has talked about here. While we are a little bit behind on some of it, we have also moved forward on so many of those elements only because we have been monitoring, and advocates across the city have worked on it. Look it up. I had we had a committee hearing, which we talked about that. Vernon mentioned the Forest Friend. If you haven't signed up for the Tree Near You, do it now. Almost nobody in the city has signed up for it. It's critically important. And the ways to support residents to do that is we should also have a whole Miss Yet program, the Mayor Summer Youth Employment Program, for everybody to do that. And the Committee on Public Planting has lots of ideas to extend all this, and we should build on all of those.
Dan?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm really proud of the work that I did as Councilor Zondervan's aide over 6 years. When Quentin first got into office, we learned that there had been a 20% decline in our tree canopy over the last decade. And we took swift action based on the recommendations of the Urban Forest Master Plan, which I'm glad Patty brought up. We passed the Tree Protection Ordinance, which makes it harder to cut down trees, healthy mature trees on private property. You either have to replant or pay a fee. We tripled the tree planting budget, which is why you're seeing more trees being planted around the city. Especially, we need to focus on vulnerable neighborhoods. I appreciate that Aisha and others brought that up. You know, there were some residents on Plymouth Street that said, we want trees in our street. The city gave them a blanket refusal. No, it's too skinny. We said, take another look. We went over there with the staff and we found 5 spots to plant trees on Plymouth Street. Go take a look next time you canvass. There are 5 new trees on Plymouth Street, and it's only because Quentin and I pushed the city to actually go do the deep work. Thank you.
Time. Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of things that everyone else has said. We have to plant more trees. I work and live on another part of the city that's pretty dense, and we have a lot of impermeable surfaces. And in COVID, I worked over at a place in East Cambridge called Cambridge Crossing. Don't know if you've been there, but when I was young, that was freight yards. It became derelict parking lots. And then it's actually through developing that area that we've seen more trees planted. Now it's a lot more green space. When we do create more housing density, we are actually having a good impact on our carbon footprint. The truth is that where I live, we have less impermeable surfaces per person than they do in other parts of Cambridge, the leafier parts of Cambridge. I'd like to see our canopy extend, but I also want to make sure that when we talk about environmental issues, we have to remember environmental justice. And then as sad as it is to see a tree go, it's even worse to displace some of our lower and middle income residents. To be a truly climate resilient city, we have to include those people in our solutions.
Thank you. Peter?
Thank you. I think in order to kind of look at this issue, there are 2 big areas: the areas that are in need of tree canopy and areas that have existing tree canopy. In other words, I think the rate of expansion has to be more than rate of reduction, if reduction is allowed feasibly. In order to solve this, I think it has to be a multidisciplinary approach, meaning environmentalists, biologists, even financial and business experts and others. We got to map tree coverage, areas of greatest need and potential for growth, set target to expand and improve. And I like others said, choose the right mix of trees. For existing ones, existing tree canopies, I think incentivizing and regulating the protection of those is very important, and reviewing if these canopies have the right mix of trees, that's also very important to keep in.
Okay, thank you. I believe everyone has had an opportunity to answer.
Yes.
So we will move on to the next question, which will cover the topic of housing, which throughout the state, as we all know, is an issue. 20% of rental properties are currently occupied by university students, whether undergrads, graduate students, postdocs, interns, and/or others. These universities often increase housing allowances to meet rental prices, driven skyward by local, national, and international factors. Would you be amenable to requiring our universities and large commercial employers to come up with an area-wide housing and transportation plan for their affiliates? This is a yes or no answer, but you do have 15 seconds, so I leave the use of that time to you. And on this question, we will start with John.
Yes, is that the question? I think that the universities could afford, and the companies could afford to work out some housing issues for us.
Time. Okay, Joe.
Yes, 100% yes. Harvard and MIT and the innovation services that have grown in our city have brought prosperity to a lot of us, but it's also been a burden for some of us as well. Harvard and MIT are great neighbors, but they could be better neighbors. I absolutely agree that they should be helping us with our transportation and housing needs.
Time. Dan?
Yep. So my answer is yes. And I think that what's most important is that the next council withholds any upzoning for MIT's West Campus until they commit to building more student housing as part of that deal. I'm proud to stand with the Harvard and MIT graduate students in making that demand, and their voices need to be at the table as we move forward.
Thank you. Adrian?
Yes, I agree with most of what my co-panelists have said. Yes, we need to have participation from these companies and universities in planning for housing and transportation moving forward.
Thank you. Vernon?
Yes, I do support the universities and the corporations to lend their assistance and their intellectual capital to helping to solve and to the transportation and housing. And I also support that the most marginalized should be brought into, including graduate students that are often left behind in this process.
Federico?
Yes, naturally. And yes, rents are high no matter where. And I would urge all of us to look at the Montpellier model in France. As a university town, they are offering free transportation to the students and greatly discounted housing. The Montpellier model is definitely something to look at. Thank you.
Patty?
Absolutely. It's not just students, staff. Fully 25% of our city's residents are related to the university, and we should encourage more deals like Harvard as a $20 million loan fund that funds affordable housing. We need to have more of those from large employers.
Peter?
My answer is yes, and I teach at Harvard, and so I think wider shoulders, generally you bear more responsibilities. I do think that they are very smart people that can come up with ways to help us with in terms of transportation and housing.
Thank you. Carrie?
Yes, I think that's a great idea to have them part of the solution, and it assures that they take responsibility in a proactive way to help address this housing issue and transportation issue. And I think that they're contributing to the rising housing costs. And so connecting and collaborating with them to come up with
help. Thank you. Doug?
Yes. The Town and Gown report says there's 6,000 grad students that compete for market rate housing in Cambridge. They need to house them. It's as simple as that. They need to come up with solutions for that problem.
Thank you. Kathy?
Yes.
Okay. Robert?
Yes, certainly, and it should be a mandatory part of the Town Gown reports every year. But I do have to say that there are always going to be some grads who actually choose to live outside, and you simply can't force them to live in university property, like me.
Thank you. Paul?
Yes, and as the chair of the Economic Development University Relations Committee, it's something that maybe I can try to pull off before the term ends. And also the payment in lieu of taxes agreements with both universities is coming up soon. Maybe it's something that be included as part of the pilot agreements with the city.
Thank you. Aisha?
Oops.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say absolutely. And I also just want to center and name Ms. Sandra Graham, former counselor, State Rep Sandra Graham, whose work was dedicated to doing just that for Harvard's property. I think it is critical that we are partners and that we actually work with Harvard and MIT to make that happen, as well as Lesley University. Thank you.
Joan?
Yes, agree with everything that has been said. They need to be part of the solution of our housing crisis.
And how?
Cautiously, yes. I think they should be a part of our solution. I'm from Harvard and MIT. I stayed without their assistance. Their job is to create the leaders for the world, and we should work together for the housing.
Thank you very much. Okay, everyone has had an opportunity to answer. We will now move to a question on historic preservation in the city, and each there will be a 30-minute limit.
30 seconds.
What do you feel about historic preservation in the city of Cambridge? Rank how important historic preservation is to you. For instance, again, using a scale perhaps of 1 to 3, with 1 being your highest priority. And we will start with Joe.
Sorry, I think it's probably a 2. I think historic preservation is, we're a city that's, 390 years old, and we should celebrate that. There's a lot of things that Cambridge has accomplished, but I don't want it to be a barrier to creating the housing density that we need to make sure that lower middle income folks can get to stay here. And I sometimes think that it is used as a way to prevent us from doing some policies. But in general, yeah, I support it.
Thank you. Frederico?
Yeah, so those who know that I made a film called Touching History, Harvard Square, the Bank, and the Tasty Diner, and it's available online. You can view it. In a word, in order of importance, I would preserve structures first. Second, I would do whatever needed to be done to preserve the cultural ideas that Cambridge is founded on, namely democracy. And third, I would definitely work on technology and the technological innovation that happened here. And I would advocate the creation of a museum for the city of Cambridge, a kind of a repository of all the various achievements that the city has accomplished. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, I think it's a 2. It really depends on which historical item we're talking about. Some are more important than others. We need to be judicious on what they are, and some, because we have in our care a lot of history that the rest of the country looks towards and learns about, and whether it's African American history or revolutionary history, it's all here. We should take good care of it, but not all history needs to be saved.
Thank you. Peter?
So I think generally I am for city preservation. I think that's the cultural part of this city. We have a lot of good histories. At the same time, I agree. I think there needs to be a balance. Meaning what do we need further, and is that going to be a fair thing for these old buildings? Preservation, restoration, adaptive reuse, rehab. Those are all things that we can consider for older buildings.
Thank you. Vernon?
I think we should preserve landmarks such as where W.E.B. Du Bois lived on 20 Flag Street, first African-American to graduate from Harvard. And I also think that we should balance our preserving of historic buildings in light of contemporary challenges. I think that we should also think about if we have to repurpose a historic building, then we make sure to mention the history with it. So I'm ranking at a 2.
Okay, thank you. Patty?
I really don't see preservation in conflict at all with density. I don't see preservation of our historic nature as something that needs to and end up losing us something else. I really think it works in concert. I agree with all the redistribution of using our existing buildings And also there are sometimes when we live with change, we need to understand that the city will continue to change. And that doesn't mean that we won't have some sections of the city that stay with their historic buildings while other sections are wholesale different, which is what we're living with right now.
Okay. Robert?
I just want to say right up front that I have a reverence for all facets of Cambridge history. I spend a lot of time delving into it. That includes buildings, places, people, and events. This is not to say that I would be in support of preserving every old shack that has ever lived here, has ever existed here. But generally speaking, I view this as a non-negotiable. This is part of our heritage and we have to keep it.
Thank you. Doug?
Yeah, I'm a historian by training and a longtime board member at History Cambridge. So historic preservation is pretty important to me. But that said, I also believe that it's important to not only preserve, but also creatively reuse and repurpose. And I think that we should do more of that. That said, I oppose the attacks that have been made on neighborhood conservation districts. I think review creates better projects and better outcomes. So I don't necessarily believe that we should have unfettered development.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, so I thought that the changes to the historical stuff went too far, which is why I spent many months working with proponents, opponents, and the historical commission to find something where there was common ground. For example, the original proposal would have gutted the landmark process. I got that taken out. I also want to say it's like, whose history are we preserving? I think we need to do a better job of preserving working class history and history of people of color and LGBTQ plus people, minorities around the city. I think it's important to do that. And yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Aisha?
Thank you for the question. And I will just say that, yes, it is important that we're preserving specific landmarks of our history. I do believe that there's some history that is just really challenged and it's really complex, but it is a part of the Cambridge history. So I totally and completely get it. However, if it is harming to others, I think we need to reassess what that looks like for our community. But I also think that we need to have an educational campaign around all the history in our community, make sure that our young people are actually learning that and that there is curriculum that's being brought into our school system. Thank you.
Thank you. How?
One, very important to preserve Cambridge. Cambridge is a very special speckle of the bigger world. I have two reasons. One is I came from Beijing. I saw a lot of things got destroyed and removed because of industrialization. Later, we all regret. We don't want that same mistake happen here. Two, I also believe housing projects very important to me. We can find solutions to preserve both.
Thank you. Kathy?
Both my big projects at Magazine Beach and St. Augustine's African Orthodox Church have been historic preservation projects, so I would give it a 1. I think Cambridge will soon celebrate 400 years, and we've got a rich history. We should celebrate all aspects of it. I love that the Historic Commission invests in the adaptive reuse of like our old factories and convents and makes it, working with developers, turns it into affordable housing. And I would think we need to preserve our neighborhood conservation districts, which are a tool that help us preserve our rich architectural heritage.
Okay, thank you. Joan?
I absolutely believe that we need to have the historic preservation of our structures in the city. And we also need to understand the implications of those on our neighborhoods. They're very important to the character, and we want to maintain the character of our neighborhoods. So I think preserving the Historic Commission, the NCDs is a really important part of maintaining the culture and history of Cambridge and neighborhoods.
Thank you. Paul?
I'd give it a 1.5 too. I liked Doug's term, the creative repurposing. I think a great example of where we've been able to blend history with new design is the Cambridge Central Library. Also, just as I door knock, seeing how people in East Cambridge and other parts of North Cambridge have been repurposing old homes and really keeping the flavor of the history of the neighborhood, but making a modern, livable home for people. So it's important to me, but as somebody said, I don't want to protect every old shack in the city either. So
Thank you. Adrian?
Yeah, I would give it a 2. I think we have a lot of important things to balance, as others have raised. Housing is a concern. We need to make sure that we're not preserving everything, and we need to think about whose history we're preserving. So I think repurposing is a really great way to do that, and making sure that we're educating people about it, as Aisha said. So 2.
Okay. And Carrie?
I would say a number 1. I think it's really important and we need to preserve history and the unique characteristics of Cambridge. And I want Cambridge to remain a place where our history is celebrated and shared. We have so much uniqueness to our community. And this place is so amazing that we have the ability to walk out our door and walk in the footsteps of history and learn if we choose. So preservation is really important to me. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all.
That's
And,
everybody.
Okay, thank you. And now we will move on to, I don't know if I will pronounce this correctly as an acronym. However, the Building Energy Use Disclosure Ordinance, I guess known as WEDO. If I've said it wrong, someone correct me. Thank you. This city policy requiring Cambridge to move faster than state mandates to require individual homeowners and other property owners to convert their heating and other systems or appliances from gas to electricity could start in the year 2025. This unfunded mandate, which could easily cost homeowners, particularly of older homes, over $50,000, will hurt people on both fixed incomes, cash poor residents, and nonprofits, such as churches, hospitals, and I guess one could say universities over in Cambridge. A heavy fee is charged if one does not meet this mandate's requirements by a specified time. Here are 4 yes or no questions for each of you. I will ask each question individually on this, and I will now read those 4 questions. That was to frame out the issue before you. Okay. Should the city provide exemptions to nonprofits and historic buildings as other progressive cities have? You will be asked to give a yes or no response. You will have 40 seconds to illuminate your yes or no response. And we will start this question with Kathy.
Yes. I understand that 60% of our housing stock is vintage buildings with old systems. And I think I understand the passion in supporting WEDO, but it doesn't make sense to me. I think churches, nonprofits, and residences should not need to conform. I think we're heading in the right direction in so many different ways. We've been a green community since 2014. We've reduced municipal emissions dramatically. We're doing great things already.
Vernon.
I think we should think creatively and strategically about working with our nonprofits, our houses of worship, etc. We know that nonprofits are not making millions of dollars. So I think in order to reduce carbon footprint and their greenhouse gas emission, I think the city could think creatively and thoughtfully in collaboration with each and every individual organization to ensure that they are reducing their carbon footprint or being able to help subsidize the conversion to clean energy, which we so desperately need in our city to reduce our carbon footprint.
Time. Adrian?
I'm really struck by what Vernon just said, actually. I agree with a lot of that. We have so much history here, as we just talked about in the previous question, that if we exempt all of the historic buildings, then we won't have nearly as strong an impact on reducing our carbon footprint. So I think we need to be creative about engaging with nonprofits and other historic buildings about how they can be reducing their carbon footprint and whether we can find creative ways to support them in making these changes on that time frame.
Thank you. Carrie?
Yeah, so absolutely, we should be providing these exemptions for historic buildings and churches. But I think what we really need to do as well is be transparent with the whole process. We need a cost analysis of retrofitting apartments, of condos, of single family, of multifamily. We need the transparency and accountability to come to the people, because what I've been hearing are people are angry that they don't even understand Budo. We need to do a better job of sharing the information with our community and make sure everybody's on board and understands the full idea of how this implementation will affect families, especially as we look at seniors on incomes.
Hi. Federico?
Yeah, so absolutely exemptions for nonprofits. They're not in it for obviously to make a profit, and I think they should proceed at the speed that that suits them. That Budo itself wants Cambridge to move faster than the state, I think is interesting. At the same time, I don't want it to move so fast that it ends up yielding negative or less than desirable results. I've just learned through your question that I didn't know that this mandate was unfunded, and I'm just curious about how that's going to work. So that's my answer for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Patty?
There's 3 other questions related to Budo, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, just because there are 2 major things wrong. No residents are even included, and we are not behind the state. We are way behind the state law. This is not ahead of the state law. We can talk about that later. As far as whether churches should be exempted in historical buildings across the board, no, because what we have in Budo, what we passed is something much more sensible, which is to say, if you have a financial issue or you have a historic building issue, or you have some technical reason why you can't do this, then apply for a waiver. So that's already in there, and that's what it should be based on. It shouldn't be based on use, because you may have a building that happens to be a church that is easy to do and is tons of money and should do it, whereas you have other ones that may not. So I think it's exactly the wrong way to go.
Time. John?
Yes, I think that you should exempt them. I think it's could be a very huge cost for these guys to get there. I mean, our grid right now, electricity is mostly carbon based anyway, so the pluses may not be as big if we did a real benefit analysis. But I think that making people move that don't have a lot of money, that's a tough sell.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
I do think the city should give exemptions, but I do think that the criteria for these exemptions, or if we call them waivers, should be transparent, fair, clear, and having common sense, especially when the mandate is unfunded.
Thank you. Joan?
I think we had this conversation up front, and we should have exempted the religious institutions so we don't put any more administrative burden on our staff. Budo created an immense amount of work and administrative, I think, responsibility. This seemed like an easy one for us to tackle up front and exclude from the requirements.
Thank you. How?
Well, in addition to exemption, I'm in general against forced conversion for everyone. For churches and not for profit, in addition to exemption, we should provide technical support and incentives for them to convert. I can show people, for example, we can save 50 to 70% of energy use without conversion, and let's do that first.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I completely reject the premise of the question. First of all, residential condos were exempted, large residential was exempted. As Patty noted, there were pathways created to exempt things like religious institutions and nonprofits. The fact is that this policy that we passed goes after the biggest the commercial properties in our city. 66% of the emissions in our city come from 6% of the building stock. That's the Biotech and Kendall Square. This proposal will effectively go after them without hurting the other groups that you're listing. And so I reject the misinformation that you shared before you read the question.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
Thank you. So my simple answer is yes, I would exempt them. Patty and I are the only sitting counselors. The best we could get was this process to get a waiver. I will say that the original Budo that came out did include all of those things that Mr. Totten just mentioned. It did include residential and condos, and only because myself and several other counselors fought hard against it did we get those removed. So I'm comfortable with the Budo that passed. That's why I voted for it, because I felt like it was, as Mr. Taunton has said, that it's only going towards the large institutional folks. So I'm comfortable with it as it is right now. I would not make any further changes to Budo at this point.
Thank you. Robert?
First, I want to express my gratitude for Councilor Toner for actually making those changes to Budo. I thought it was exactly the right thing to do. Generally speaking, I'm not in favor of anything kind of unfunded mandates. But I think that assistance, financial assistance, incentives is really the right way to go. And if that means stretching this out over many years for some harder to convert properties, I think that would be very much in order. And not just sticking it to everybody to maintain an absolutely rigid deadline.
Thank you. Aisha?
Thank you. I feel like Mr. Winters just took all the words out of my mouth. I think it is important that we have some kind of approach that really supports our agencies and our companies but I do, again, respect and appreciate Councilor Toner for his work and the amendments that were made to Budo, and understand that if this was to go forward in a way that would impact our residents and nonprofits in a negative way, then that's just going to have a negative impact on our city as a whole. And so we would really need to be thinking about how we are funding this and supporting. I mean, we do want all of our businesses and residents and everyone to be more green, but we have to have a smart approach to how we implement that.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I'm in favor of the giving exemptions and being able to apply for not having to get it done. I do think that, and I think it's admirable, the goal of trying to catch up to the state or pass the state, bring our carbon output down to zero is fantastic. We haven't talked about it, you may ask, but I do worry about the impact on renters, the 66% of us who rent in this city, and what this will mean for us when eventually those places will be expected. Our rents in the city are already unbearably high. And I worry that the cost of Budo will end up being passed on to tenants as well as cash-strapped homeowners.
Thank you. Doug?
I think everybody agrees the goal is good of decarbonizing. I would support waivers. I think the challenge is that the oldest buildings are often the least energy efficient. And so we can actually save some of these organizations real money if we can help them ultimately comply. I think the challenge is that we need to come up with robust incentives. The city's starting to roll out sort of incentives for electrification. I would target these organizations first.
Okay, thank you. Right, we will now move on to question 2. If the proposed fines were to be put in place, do you support the city taking liens on private properties? Again, you will have 40 seconds with yes. Please start off with yes or no and provide your rationale. And we will start with Joan.
No, I do not think we should be putting liens on properties, particularly since we created the problem by having an unfunded mandate. So no.
Thank you. Peter?
I feel like Joan exactly just said everything I wanted to say. I agree. I say a no.
Okay, thank you. Robert?
Definitely a no. But I think that anyone who's not meeting any of the requirements, you should basically tag them so that you start to work with them, present all the possible means of actually making the appropriate changes, and just work with them. Just work with them, just like a lot of other city departments work with people all the time. And that would be really the way to affect it. And no fines, please, no fines.
Okay. John?
No, I think that's a little harsh.
Okay, Kathy,
No.
Carrie,
No, we need to incentivize the change and help, especially for our seniors on fixed incomes and other people in difficult financial situations. So the idea of becoming greener and cleaner and safer should be a collaborative effort, helping our community, not hurting it.
thank you. Patty?
No, I'm not into liens. Remember, no houses are included and it's only the very largest property owners. No single resident could possibly be affected by these fines. The most exciting thing about this, which could be transformative, is that the way we would allow offsets, which we're requiring to be local, is that that could be used that if I am Harvard and I have an historic lab and I can't reduce the carbon, we are going to say, fine, then take an affordable housing development in Cambridge, reduce their carbon, and you get ton for ton credit for that. That's the kind of exciting thinking that we put into this ordinance, which is groundbreaking and is going to, I think, blow away any other city if we manage to do it. So it's really exciting to think about that.
All right, Doug?
I'd say no. I don't think the city needs the money, number one. And number two, I would support an incentive-based system.
Joe?
I also know. I think the possibilities, as others pointed out, of trying to create solutions, as Patty has said, we already built into it, is a much better tool for trying to get there. It's not the fault of the residents who live here that we have become so incredibly reliant on carbon. Our whole planet is. So we have to figure out how to do that without punishing people for just doing what they were told.
Thank you. Vernon?
I'd say no. And I think that the city could collaboratively work with residential buildings and folks that don't meet the mandate, if you will, to think about how it would make sense to do it. And as it was mentioned earlier, that residential properties weren't built into the veto that passed. But I think that the city could creatively and work with homeowners and small businesses, homeowners rather, and nonprofits to push that in a direction where they would be incentivized to reduce their carbon footprint.
Thank you. Adrian?
Yeah, I'll also say no. In general, I don't believe in punitive measures. I think positive reinforcement is much more effective. So what others are saying about incentivizing, coming up with creative solutions and alternatives, I agree with that. And as Patty mentioned, the fact that this isn't actually going to affect any individual residents makes the question relatively moot.
Thank you. Paul?
I'll just say if it were affecting individual residents or nonprofits, I would say no, no fines. Our own outgoing city solicitor said that straight fines is probably not legal. It would be challenged in court. I agree with Councilor Nolan that we crafted the Budo ordinance so that there are creative ways for people to meet it. It still might get challenged. We don't know, but the reason I voted for it is working with the business community and Councilor Nolan and others. We got consensus. So what we voted on was consensus. That's why I want to keep it the way it is and not make any further changes because we have consensus right now.
Okay, thank you. How?
No, I think we should not displace residents such as seniors, like many of us mentioned earlier. We shouldn't displace not-for-profit, shouldn't displace lower or medium income people who may need technical assistance and incentives. As the climate crisis go deep, we actually spend more on the hottest months and the coldest months. We, as a city, we should even consider to provide certain assistance to seniors and people in needs.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, so again, I think it's a frankly ridiculous question given the fact that the Budo that passed is only going after the large commercial property owners. If Alexandria defaults on their building, we should put a lien on their building. I support that. But we're not talking about small owners. I think it's unfortunate that question was even asked. Carrie, I know you're just reading a script, but you were fed misinformation. And it's not an unfunded mandate. The city has already committed millions of dollars to addressing this problem. They've just started electrify Cambridge as well. And we're working towards a new community choice aggregation program, which is going to get most property owners most of the way to the goal in a very short time without additional cost to themselves.
Time. Federico?
No, that's my answer. Simply put, I think what I'm hearing here in general is that I love the fact that Buda was reached through consensus, and it's clear that it's a complex piece of legislation. And I think that there has to be a lot more education among all of us who are running about, especially me, about what exactly this is. I tend to want to go after large developers, large buildings, more obviously, who aren't towing the line because they are probably and highly likely greater polluters than individuals. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Okay, Aisha?
Thank you for the question. I want to say that absolutely no. And as we already heard, you know, it is important that we're educating all of us on what this actually means and what it looks like for our community, who's actually at risk and who isn't right now. I do see that at the end of the day, as a community, we are going to want to be as green as we possibly can. So we do want to think with intention about our future and what does that look like for, say, residents or nonprofits and what have you. But for right now, if we're talking about developers and everything, at the end of the day, we want to say no, but we do want to work with anybody, our small businesses, large businesses that could be struggling. That's important to do as a community.
Time. Question 3. Are you supportive of neighborhood residents playing a role in the city's decisions about the placement of the large transformers needing to be installed in each neighborhood in the city? And explain your answer. You have 40 seconds, and we will start with Federico.
Yeah, Carrie, can I just ask you to repeat that question?
Sure. Are you supportive of neighborhood residents playing a role in city decisions about the placement of the large transformers needing to be installed in each neighborhood? Okay. Okay, are we ready? And we will start that question with Dan.
Oh, I thought you.
Yep. So I will say that, of course, and this is necessary infrastructure that we must install and that everybody in the region and across the country is going to need to install. I'm really proud of the work that I did as Councilor Zondervan's aide to move the siting of the transformer on Fulkerson Street out of the neighborhood. It was going to be very impactful to the neighborhood right across the street from the school and the playground. And we worked really hard to get that placed in Kendall Square. And when we get to the point where we need to have the next conversation, we will absolutely involve the neighbors and make sure that that is cited in a place that is acceptable.
Thank you. Patty?
First, if it wasn't clear, I am not in favor of liens. I don't know if I said that the last question. As far as having transformers, they won't need to be in every single neighborhood, and they should be developed and improved across the city. There's a substation right now in Alewife, a perfect spot. It's going to be probably doubled in size. The one that Dan just referenced in Kendall literally doubles the capacity and will serve all of Kendall Square for the next 20 or 30 years. So absolutely neighborhoods will and should be included in these conversations. Eversource also has indicated, however, they do need both the state level and the local level to speed up the decisions on this so that they can get it in place in time. And so we need to work together collectively so that neighbors can have their input and yet the Eversource can have the time that they need.
Time. Thank you. Robert?
I think it's important that there be some site flexibility now in anticipation of the siting, even if in fact it's a decade from now, so that not everything gets built up when in fact we have to anticipate these kinds of needs. And I also have to just toss in, as a person who's had his own difficulties with Eversource, they're not always generally proactive in doing their planning. They are often reactive and only actually take action when something is sort of thrust in front of them. So I think it's very important to sort of sit down with Eversource and do some serious planning for this.
Okay, thank you. Carrie?
Yeah, I think it's important to include the neighbors in any decision of where these transformers might be going, and also to look at health implications. So making sure that they're placed in safe locations with as little disruption to the neighborhood as possible. But obviously we need them, so We'll just have to work together.
Okay, thank you. How?
We should involve the neighbors' input. We also should involve experts' input. Because when you talk about transformer, I'm an electrical engineer, it's in my field. If, for example, the transformer array in Alewife, if it is not oil-based, oil insulated, we should consider put it indoor, create more floor space for energy saving, energy peak shaving solutions. And neighbors, particular, as of me, I would think of transformer as a one noise hazardous thing, and it should be well maintained. The site should be beautifully looking. So we need input.
Time. Adrian?
Yes, we should allow neighbors to have input. We are public servants, so we need to listen to what the public is asking for. If we need to be worried about the time frame or planning in the future, there can be options that are given to neighbors and planning in advance of which ways to mitigate any of the concerns that are raised in advance with Eversource and others.
Okay, thank you. Kathy?
Yes, neighbors should have input, and I'll tell you, I'm really concerned because our major station for Cambridge is in the Great Swamp at Alewife, and it needs to be put on pylons and lifted because when we have a great big flood, we're all not going to have electricity for 3 to 4 weeks, which is a real concern. And I can tell you from working with Eversource at Magazine Beach, where there'll be Magazine Beach is part of the greater Cambridge Energy Project. So high transmission wires will go under the playing fields between 24 and 28 there. I can tell you Eversource can't build anything unless projects are permitted. So that's why they can't plan in advance. And I know from experience in Cambridgeport, because we have a substation here, neighbors don't like them.
Time, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Doug?
Yeah, thanks. I have 2 substations near me, and I think it's important that neighbors are involved in that planning process. I think the city has to be our advocate. The city's the main connectivity there, and I think they need to be more aggressive in winning concessions. I think in our case, neither site is flood resilient, and in one case, the city would like to connect a road through the site, and so it's up to the city to push on those things. To negotiate those concessions on behalf of our community.
Okay.
And we skipped Joan.
No, I haven't finished with the list.
Okay, my list says Joan Pickett's next, but.
Now, Federico?
I think that this is the first I've heard about large transformers coming into not all the neighborhoods. Of course, every citizen, every neighborhood should have a say in the matter. I like the idea of site flexibility, which was evoked earlier. I would say this is, for me, a good example of getting the citizenry out and in front of the question. I think that community meetings are absolutely essential on this kind of thing. But how do you get folks motivated to actually sit down and learn about this and take a position on that? And so this is a great example of a civic minded voter that can have a say in this matter. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, certainly. The neighborhood should be involved in anything that's this large, a change to their neighborhood. So yes, we should include the neighborhood in this and work out the technical issues while you work out the neighborhood issues.
Okay, Aisha?
Yes, absolutely. The community should be involved. The community should have a say and an input in practically everything that's happening across our city. Not only do we have public comment, but we have spaces where we should be having deeper community meetings, especially when large transitions, implementations of things are happening.
Okay, Paul?
This is going to be a very, very interesting process. Yes, residents need to have a say in this, and we do need to. I like Federico's idea, and maybe I'll have another economic development meeting with Eversource to talk about what this means. but I had two during this Budo process, and during that process, they said we would probably need 4 to 5 new transformers in the city to meet our ultimate goal and needs of full net zero. And that, it might not be every neighborhood, but we're going to have several neighborhoods that need transformers. And Councilor McGovern and I co-sponsored, and I forget if Councilor Nolan was on that. Sorry, Patty, if you were, did put in a policy where we're asking the city to be proactive and start identifying some places that might be good places for transformers, so we're not doing this at the last minute.
Vernon?
Absolutely, the community should be involved. I think that's the greatest asset of a healthy, strong democracy, is when the citizenry is engaged and activated and mobilized. And I think that's what we should strive to have, is participatory democracy. Related to substations, I think we should critically and carefully think about the placement. And I think neighborhood associations can help with that, because we realize and recognize that these substations have exploded in other cities. And so we want to ensure that we are setting a situation where it is in a climate resilient community and climate resilient measures are in place, so the substation doesn't explode when we see a flood. Thank you.
Joe?
Yes, absolutely. I think that Cambridge, any decision that we make, Cambridge's residents, the neighborhood group should be involved in it. And I think that we often are pretty involved in it. One of the problems is we don't get involved until we see it happening. We have to accept that there are disruptions to our daily lives. That's part of the cost of living in a city. And unfortunately, in my neighborhood, we're going to see the high power lines go down our street. And, you know, it's going to be a sacrifice my neighborhood's going to have to make. So when we think about it, we recognize that we might not want it near us. We have to find the flexibility of site locations. And remember that we got to have them somewhere. We all have to share that burden.
Thank you. And Peter?
I am in agreement with the neighborhood residents playing a role in generally any of our city's decision, including transformation issues here. I think the truth is that whatever the policy we might be talking about, there are neighborhoods and residents who are affected more than others. I think it's good common sense for us to be understanding and at times patient in having the most efficient communication / education, which typically lead to a better result in productivity in the long run.
Okay, thank you.
Carrie, could I just interrupt it?
Yes.
Joan Pickett?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joan.
I think people know I've been a very strong advocate and supporter of neighborhoods, so absolutely need to have neighborhood input. But this is a really big community conversation, and I think the earlier we start it, the faster we can move forward. This is going to be a huge educational issue, and we only have so much land in the city. And people want to do various things with it. We want green space, we want more housing. And now we have this requirement that we are going to have to build substations. So we really do need to get on this and develop a plan as to how we're going to be moving forward with this initiative.
Thank you. Susan, do you need to make an inquiry?
Yeah, what I do is the last part of this question is a simple yes, no. It's a straightforward. And then one more question, and then we'll take the break.
Okay, sounds fine. Right. And again, this would be a yes or no question, 15 seconds. Should the city begin training to help pay for the highly skilled labor forces that will be needed to help with initiatives such as Budo, et cetera? Or do you view that as the work of the state? Thank you. Yes or no?
Is this going to be 15 or 40 seconds?
No, this should be just straight. I think we
Yes
need to
or
go
no?
straight yes, no.
Excuse me, as a
15.
facilitator, it will be 15 seconds, yes or no. Okay, clear? And we will start with Federico on this one.
So I can answer and add something? Okay.
15 seconds.
Yeah. So yes, but it depends, because I believe the private sector should be involved, especially in high-end training of very sophisticated future jobs. I think the city and the state can be.
Peter?
I say yes. Yeah, but I think the city and the state can work together, collaborate together to kind of work this out. But generally I say yes.
Thank you. Carrie?
I would say yes, and we should also be incentivizing these skills in our high school. So we have such great kids coming in our high schools. We should be funneling them right into these awesome jobs.
Okay, thank you. Joan?
Yes, we should, and we should look for joint partnership opportunities for education with the state and with private industries so that we can have the right resources we need to move forward with Veto 2.
Thank you. John?
Yes, I think the high school could be a good place to start and build out some of these skill sets that the kids are going to need. I think that we can partner with the businesses as well as the state or anybody else that would help us, but we could take the lead.
Time. Thank you. How?
Yes, Cambridge transforming the world. Cambridge should lead.
Okay. Robert?
I'm going to go sort of a bit of a yes and no here. The example being Mass Save, where in fact it's not the city that's funding it necessarily, but ratepayers. And I like that model better. And to whatever degree the city can assist, that's great.
Time. Dan?
Yeah, again, I don't love the framing here because we passed the Green Jobs Ordinance, which requires the city to create training programs for our low-income youth to get into these jobs. I think so. I think that's very important. If I were elected, I would really work with the school committee to get the Green Jobs Ordinance integrated into the RISTA program so that it's at the high school.
Thank you. Adrian?
Yes, we should, and we should work with the state to do it. And the city has already developed a number of successful training programs, so this could be another.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
Yes, the high school definitely, but we should be working with the state and anybody else, including IBEW. IBEW tells me they don't have enough electricians to do the work that's currently on their plate, never mind going full net zero.
Thank you. Vernon?
Yes, I think collaboration is definitely important, and I also think that the Green Jobs Ordinance should be built out a little bit more in terms of adding funding so we can incorporate it and integrate it into our schools. And also, when we think about just transition, we want to make sure that workers who are working in other industries. Yeah, thank you.
Patty?
Definitely, we need state, we need local. We need a fund just as we're spending on affordable housing. And also, just so you know, the state law requires us to reduce emission pollution by 2030, and we are not going to meet it even if Budo works the way it's supposed to. We are not meeting the state law.
Thank you. Aisha?
Thank you. Yes, we should absolutely. And as folks already said, definitely bring it into our schools to educate our young people. This is going to be the new wave, and our young people need to have the skill in order to really be effective and efficient in doing this work.
Time. Joe?
Yes, 100%. And we should get state in as well. I think it's important we spend $33,000 on our high school students. We should make sure that they have opportunities to be able to stay here afterwards. Right now, we don't do a great job on that. So creating jobs through training for our schools and through just work programs would be great. Yeah.
Thank you. Doug?
I would say yes. I'd also like to see more collaboration with the universities as they work to electrify as well. It's one thing to give people training, it's another to actually find them jobs in our community.
Okay, thank you. And now we will move to our last question before we will take a 5-minute break.
Carrie, you forgot me.
Kathy?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I think the state should be part of it. And I agree, our RISTA program currently doesn't have plumbing or electricity. We used to send our students over to Minuteman Tech in Lexington for training, but that's not an option anymore. So we might want to think about encouraging a plumbing and electrical program right there at the high school. I agree, others should help with funding as well.
Time. Okay, thank you. Have we now covered everyone? Okay, thank you. Again, apologies for that. And the last question before we will take a break is relative to labs, which take on, I think, a whole new meaning in terms of that term if you live in the Commonwealth and you think of Cambridge. They are now a critical part of Cambridge's economic viability. But unlike many other cities, they are zoned as offices with no distinction between them vis-a-vis potential dangers, such as a biosafety level, et cetera, a lab that might be next to residential properties, et cetera. We now have labs in one East Cambridge building that also houses a pre-K childcare site. In addition to our lack of regulations based on biosafety factors, we also have no posted evacuation routes. Our zoning on our lack of oversight may be one of the reasons we as a city are so attractive to labs. How would you change our zoning on labs so that they would be safely regulated and placed? And due to time, we're going to have a 30-second response to this question. And I will start with John.
Yeah, I think that if there is any type of industry that has is dangerous for the neighborhood, we should be zoning it and putting them in the right place, encouraging them to be in the right places. I don't know the details on each of the biolabs, how dangerous each one's, or if there are different classes of them. But if something can cause an evacuation, then we should be very careful about where we put it.
Thank you. Joe.
Yes.
I think when we talk about labs and we talk about developers, a lot of us have negative connotations with them, but we have to recognize the fact that they have brought prosperity to our city. I think that Robert once pointed out to me that what happens, I don't know that we should be focusing on creating more lab space as what happens when there's that cure for cancer, right? Our city is becoming too reliant on lab space, and which is why I support creating more green light industries, and which will also have the benefit of creating the jobs that we're talking about today.
Thank you. Patty?
Yeah, I think what we need to do is convene a working group with stakeholders across the spectrum of lab operators, both very large ones, and also there's lots of small entrepreneurs in the city who are creating jobs for many of our young people. There are, as Joe just said, labs that are creating the medicines of the future. However, we don't have a separation right now in our zoning code for labs versus others. So we certainly need to understand, based on the elements that you mentioned, the safety, the impact on the neighborhood, what makes sense for zoning. And like anything else, we should really include a broad spectrum of people across the community to make sure that what we put in place and proposed makes sense.
Federico?
Yeah, zoned as offices, interesting. I think that, yeah, biosafety levels, I think various classes of, in other words, a lab should have a grading system. If there are toxic chemicals, it should not be allowed near a pre-K site. If there is heavy machinery or particularly delicate machinery, it should not be allowed near a residential site. So various classes of a grading system.
Okay. Time.
Thank you.
Yeah. How?
Sorry, my button. Well, I'm proud of Cambridge because Cambridge has the best lab operators in both MIT and Harvard. I speak to testify that 30 years ago when I come to Cambridge, the hazmat training, all those things were everyday thing for us. So yes, we should strengthen lab management to provide the safety, but we shouldn't hinder the development of lab, which is very viable to our economy.
Okay. Robert?
Yeah, I think it's important to at least acknowledge the fact that the labs in our city are actually at the heart of some of the greatest innovations that are happening that help the entire world. So, but on the other hand, having a monoculture where we're so dependent on any one industry or brand or class of industries is in itself a dangerous situation. As Joe just pointed out, the thing is that if all the life sciences ones somehow, came up with certain cures right away, we might actually end up with a lot of empty space. So,
Time. Peter?
I think zoning should be encouraged to promote community safety in general, as a whole. I think more importantly, regulations on biosafety hazard needs to be clearly specified, and communication should be held among different stakeholders. I don't think any of us disagrees on the importance of safety, especially when even kids are involved. But I think the process about this, how to do this, likely matters probably the most.
Thank you. Aisha?
Thank you for the question. So we have over 40 labs in Cambridge, and I can't tell you all of them. And what I would say right now is that we need to be able to define exactly, we need the transparency and the accountability. We need to be able to say where they are, what they're actually doing. And so it can be informative to community, to residents, exactly what is happening in their neighborhood. But we also need to really develop more jobs through that process too, and be more robust and accountable from the city council standpoint in terms of who's doing business in our city and how are they giving back to the community.
Okay, time. Carrie?
I would say for safety's sakes, we have to know the biosafety level of a lab. And one of the reasons is we have to look at the hazards and learn from weather-related catastrophic events. We have to realize that natural disasters can cause industrial accidents like the Fukushima nuclear disaster, or even Hurricane Harvey, where we saw a chemical plant explosion because they didn't have the electricity to keep the chemicals refrigerated properly. That was a terrible disaster. So in our city, we should have an idea of what the lab levels are, and we should make sure they're in place.
Joan?
Absolutely, we need to look at our zoning very closely, because we wouldn't want to have a lab that has a biosafety level extremely high, like a number 3 in a residential community. And we also need to consider, how are we going to evacuate should something, as Carrie pointed out, actually happen. So I think this is very important. We started it and then it stopped for some reason. I think it needs to be invigorated with the new city council to really understand the definitions and put in place the appropriate zoning.
Time. Adrian?
Hi, thank you for the question. I think there's a lot of regulation of labs already, so we know the dangers of these labs. We just need to match the zoning with the labs so that we have them where we want them to be. So the zoning needs to be updated to account for what we already know about the labs and how they're regulated.
Thank you. Doug?
Yeah, I mean, the more common problems with labs are just daily nuisances of noise, their 24-hour lighting and odors. And so I was part of the Alewife rezoning process where we worked to get a temporary moratorium on labs so that we could actually get some control and some rules around them. And what we ended up doing was limiting labs as a percentage of overall development, but also trying to incent developers to build the community infrastructure, the parks, the roads, the bridges first, before dropping labs into an environment, if we really want to get a community in a neighborhood.
Time. Vernon?
Yes, I support the idea that we need to have a zoning to understand the biosafety levels. And as we know that extreme weather is coming more and more frequently in terms of storms and other extreme weather events, flooding, we need to know where these labs are, what the level of vulnerability that they have to extreme weather. And also, I think we need a community benefits agreement. We talked earlier about participatory democracy. I think these labs need to have a community benefits agreement. Thank you.
Yep. Paul?
So I agree with a lot of what's being said. In fact, I agree so much that I passed a policy order 6-7 months ago when there was an attempt to ban all labs or ban labs in residential neighborhoods to address these very issues about nuisances, about safety levels. We actually know where all the labs are. When I say we, the city knows. You and I as individual citizens might not know where every single lab is, but there's very few BL3 labs in the city. My friends and family who are all Cambridge firefighters and police officers tell me they are constantly trained on dealing with these issues in case of an emergency.
Dan?
Yeah, so I think the concerns about biosafety levels are overblown, frankly. Do some research. I want to talk about labs as an economic issue. Do we want biolabs to take over Central Square, our cultural district? Do we want biolabs to take over Cambridge Street and all the wonderful small businesses? So I actually wrote that zoning petition that Paul's talking about. It wouldn't have banned all labs. It was just restricting them to the areas where it makes sense. I don't want labs in Central Square. Do you want labs in Central Square? Do you want to demolish the Middle East to put up a lab? Do you want to demolish the Salvation Army to put up a lab? 300 people signed my petition.
Time. Kathy?
Oh, good, you remembered.
I did. I did not forget you this time.
Okay, I just wanted to remind you that it was our clear regulations about labs in 1977 that started our R&D biotech boom in Cambridge. So I think we do have to be very clear about what we require of biopharmaceutical companies. But I also wanted to say, long ago, I would talk to Stuart Dash, our former city planner, about labs. I feel because of light and because of the noisy penthouses that they have on their roofs, that there should be a buffer between labs and residential. They should be separated.
Thank you. Okay. At this point, we have arrived at the time that we will be taking a 5-minute break, but let me just go over a couple of points for the next part of the agenda, just to be clear. We are closely monitoring the time. We have worked hard on the various questions. We have actually been adjusting as we've gone along to be able to provide for that. And after break, the planning group may decide to, eliminate a question or two, so that we can keep to the time that we committed to all of you as candidates. Each of you will get 90 seconds as closing statement as we approach that time limit. Again, I will modify questions or tailor as we need to honor that time and respect that. We have, as I look through this, we have approximately 5 questions left, and we have 2 to 3 audience questions that were submitted prior to the committee. So again, we will adjust that, but just for your planning or thinking ahead, no more than perhaps 7 questions. Some will be yes or no and quite short. Others will have perhaps up to a minute. So hopefully that allows you as candidates to think about the time commitment, but we have made that commitment. You'll each get the 90 seconds within the time frame, and so that will happen. I now would like to ask, I think it's Peter, that you had indicated you might have to leave. Could you just give me the status of that?
I do have to leave around 6:30 for a work shift tonight.
Okay, and it is now 6, according to my clock, it is 6:11. Is that correct? So that will bring us to 6:16 promptly. And without objection, and as a facilitator, I am going to make the decision that Peter be allowed to have his 90-second statement prior to his having to leave, because again, the purpose of this format in this forum is to give every candidate who participated that opportunity to present themselves. So I will make that executive decision. And I will see you all at 6:16.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Chuck, are you ready?
Yeah.
Yes,
Need our timer.
I know. I'm asking. Chuck, are you ready?
Ready, willing, and able.
Okay, thank you. So we're 6:17, very nicely done to the group. So we have one question that will be a 30-second answer regarding one of everyone's favorite four-letter acronym in the state, the MBTA. And then following that, I will stop and allow Peter 90 seconds for his closing statements. So we will begin with Cambridge is the second largest city served by the MBTA. I guess I live in the first one. What can we Cambridgeans, I hope I said that right, do on our own or with the MBTA to get better local public transportation? And you will have 30 seconds, and we will start with Adrian.
Thank you for this question. So what we can do is continue to do the work on the fare free bus pilot that's in place, right? That they're working on that. We need to get a fare free bus. I think they're working on the #1 bus. We also need to think about creative solutions to connect areas that are no longer served by the MBTA buses. So whether that's local routes that are.
Time. Thank you. Joan?
We absolutely need to work on the fare free bus pilot that was mentioned, and I think it was Councilor Toner who brought that in. The city contributes annually to the MBTA budget. We should be demanding that there is better service because we have a transportation crisis in the city. And the only way we're going to solve it is that we have better bus service in the city.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I don't know how much power we have over the MBTA, but we do have a huge regional problem for getting people in and out of the city. Our businesses count on those students. They come in for students. They come in to work at businesses. They come in to give us services and et cetera. So we really need to figure out how to solve this regional problem. It's more than just the city itself.
Thank you. Doug?
Yeah, I think we need to do everything we can to enhance and expand bus service in the city. We went through a period last year where the state was trying to cut bus service in West Cambridge, which we opposed. I think the other big thing for me is that we need a commuter rail stop at Alewife. We're about to add 7,000 plus more residents to that neighborhood, and we need a way to move them efficiently in and out of the district.
Thank you. Robert?
It is an unfortunate reality that the MBTA isn't really in our jurisdiction. We can't really do a whole lot. I actually agree with Doug that they really ought to complete that idea from a good long while ago to do the commuter rail out at Alewife. I think that's important, and to do it in conjunction with crossing of the tracks out there. But the thing is you still need drivers, vehicles, and if you want to have good headways for the buses right now, and trains, honestly. And right now, it's not a really great option for most people.
Thank you. Kathy?
I agree. It seems like the MBTA may be challenged for another decade. I hope their new leader is able to get it back on track sooner. We may need to supplement buses with local vans. Apparently Salem and Newton have ride services. Maybe we'll need them until the MBTA buses are really functioning well. I also want a commuter rail stop at Alewife, and I'm really happy that it looks like, cross your fingers, that I-90 may be funded and West Station may be built, which would help with regional issues.
Joe?
100% of Cambridge should augment the MBTA with its own green mass transit. I think that we have an opportunity as we're redesigning our streets to include, when we talk about creating safety and creating access, to include public transit along with our creating our new bike lanes. So yeah, it should be equitable. And that's one of the problems that we've seen in my neighborhood. We are losing times with buses. We are losing, the subways are running less. So Cambridge has an obligation and an opportunity to augment the MBTA with its own services.
Aisha?
Thank you for the question. And yes, we absolutely need to do a lot of work in our infrastructure with the MBTA, in partnership with the MBTA. We do need free rides, free fare, not only for the number one, but for many other bus routes across the city. I would say for all of them, especially on the school committee. We have done a lot of work. I've worked with our Cambridge Youth Council on getting the free M7s for all of our young people across the district. So I'm really happy about that. And we just have more work to do.
Peter?
I think several of us have pointed this out already. There is a lot of work to be done. I think communications among different stakeholders, that's going to be important, discuss with experts on how to augment MBTA. I think maybe more efficient budgeting and funding, and obviously discussing and collaborating with businesses to maybe incentivize and promote more MBTA presence for Cambridgians.
Okay, thank you. Hal?
I love the idea that my fellow panelists mentioned about the commuter rail stop in Alewife. To be honest, I always wonder why the Green Line stopped or started at Leechmere, but not mid Cambridge. I also felt that the bus, electrical or not, driving through Mount Auburn Street is very noisy. So I think we should contribute brain power and equitable resources to solve the problem.
Thank you. Carrie?
So I was talking with a community member the other day who for the last 20 years has been taking public transportation from the Highlands down to MGH. Usually it would take about 45 minutes. Now she's up to an hour and a half. She's ready to start driving. This is terrible. So we really have to focus on some strategies here. Maybe some ideas would be to collaborate with other cities that are also with the MBTA and advocate for increased funding, because this is outrageous. We want more people to be taking the MBTA and make sure that they can do it in a good way.
Thank you. Vernon?
Yes, I agree with what the city is doing related to the municipal transit pilot. I think we should incentivize riders to want to take the MBTA, particularly with the number 1 and potentially the 83. We know that the 83 goes from Central to Renge Avenue. Not too far from the Renge Towers, and we know that that's an environmental justice community. So I think we should pilot that as well, and looking at piloting the 83 as well. Thank you.
Paul?
Thank you. I missed the question, but I get the gist. The policy order, I filed a policy order a year ago asking for us to look to work with MIT and Harvard and the Kendall Square business community that run shuttles through the city all the time and get our citizens to be able to use those shuttles. Also, I agree with the folks who talked about us having our own electric vehicles, at least on the main corridors, to supplement the T. I don't know if Councilor Nolan spoke, but I know she has filed similar requests in the past. And hopefully tomorrow at our city council meeting, we'll be calling on the mayor to have a roundtable meeting.
Federico?
Yeah, well, the MBTA has really got to get its act together with regard to what's happening between Kendall and Alewife. I mean, this business about eternally slow subway lines, it's really obvious that it's not doing a great job, and it's not doing a great job because it's the only game in town. It's a monopoly. So what we need is our own little system, and we need, I would say, shuttle-sized electric buses. Now that the streets of Cambridge are looking more and more like Amsterdam, we need these kinds of buses that are electric and then can move through the greater efficiency. Thank you.
Dan?
Yeah, so I agree with what others have said. We need a fare free. We can't wait for the MBTA. We need a fare free pilot of a on-demand transit service. It's actually on the agenda tomorrow night. I hope that the 2 councilors who are here will vote yes. I heard that maybe it might have the votes to pass, and that's exciting. I also just want to say, we did put our foot down when the MBTA tried to cut the 68 bus, and I'm very proud of this work that was done with Councilor Zondervan, Aisha, Rep. Connolly. We said, no, those kids at Newtown Court, Washington Elms rely on that 68 bus to get to and from school. You cannot cut those routes, and we got them to preserve those morning and afternoon routes for the kids.
And Patty, no.
Yes, so as has already been said, I worked also with on the student free card. When you provide free cards, then people end up using it, as Dan said, and Doug said, we pushed back on some of the cuts to the buses across the city. And as Paul said, the idea of a local shuttle, which many other cities have, a free shuttle that goes across the city, it should be electric, we can do. When there is frequent, reliable service, then people will use it. The council has worked to address this by working with neighborhood groups. And remember, Cambridge has, in the past, we came up with funding for the Green Line extension. We can use that kind of funding again to ensure an MBTA change.
Time, please. Thank you. Okay, we now are going to transition briefly to allow Peter to make his 90-second statement about why it is that he merits your vote and perhaps your number 1 vote. But so Peter, we'll begin the time now.
All right. Well, thank you. I think I'll make it short. To go from a middle schooler, not knowing any English when I came to the States, to a physician caring for the sick and ill, I am truly grateful to all those who have helped me along this way to achieve this American dream. I never thought about going from medicine to politics, never. But with a strong focus in health policy, some common sense, and I think a kind heart I am ready to give more back and care for more. I do carry a few degrees behind my name, but I don't believe degrees are the real reasons you should vote for me. Reasons I think I deserve your vote is that I'm unbiased, and my only goal is to make Cambridge better in the long run. I am one of the hardest working folks on earth, I promise, and I will work hard for you and the city. I am data driven and I believe in science. I would root for any average Joes who has a heart and works hard. I'm fair, reasonable, and objective. I care and I'm empathetic as well as inclusive. I think we might not agree on everything, but I promise I will work with you. I understand life is not perfect, but together we can make it better and go farther. I still have a lot to learn, but if elected, I believe I have the capacity to do just as good of a job, if not better, than the current Cambridge City Council. And I thank everyone for your time, including our fellow panelists and the host.
Okay, thank you very much. And certainly I know I speak for the citizens of Cambridge. Thank you for putting yourself forward to run for public office. Good evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we are going to transition over to the audience questions that again were submitted prior to the panel, so there is no live interaction with any questioner per se. And I'm going to turn that over to Susan for this portion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And these are short answer because we want to make sure to have each of you have enough time for your 90 seconds. And if you just raise your hands, the first is, do you support rent control in the city of Cambridge? And I'm seeing Vernon Walker and Dan Totten and Adrian, yes. And let's see who else we have here. Joe and Ayesha. Thank you. And that's the second question is, what is your position on the AH? And was that a hand raised for Federico as well?
No.
Okay. What is your position on the AHO, the Affordable Housing Overlay, and the new amendment for the AHO 2.0? And this is a yes, no, maybe. So how many of you are supporting it with a yes vote? That's Dan Totten and Vernon Walker and Joe McGuirk and Adrian and Ayesha. The second part is, would you support Dennis Carlone's proposal to do an overall assessment and citywide plan first? So it'd be a yes to do a citywide plan first. And that is noted Dan Totten. Thank you, Dan, because you're easier to read on that one. And I think yes to everybody else.
Actually, Suzanne, I haven't read his plan, so I'm a maybe. So I'm not going to say yes or no.
Thank you very much. And then the next one is changing to our zoning ordinance is often presented without a full accounting of the impact on the city budget, school enrollment, public facilities, etc. Would you endorse legislation that requires major zoning changes to be accompanied by a summary of financial and public services required? That's a yes, no. How many support that? I should have said don't support it. It looks like I've got everybody here. How you don't support that?
To be honest, I didn't understand the question. Sorry.
Providing knowledge about the financial impacts and school number impacts before we vote on major zoning. So the city would do an analysis. Okay, thank you. And then the last one is kind of several part. Are you in favor of requiring licenses for e-bikes and e-scooters because of some of the greater questions about safety with them? That's a yes or no. Are you in favor of providing, having licenses? Dan Totten, maybe I'll go.
Yes.
How many say yes? Does everybody who wants that say yes or raise your hand? And that's Hao Wang and John and Ayesha, and Patty's a maybe. And how many say no? Robert's a maybe.
Yeah, I think that, yeah.
Okay, we got lots of maybes here. This is good. Paul and Aisha and Vernon and Joe and Federico. And Dan is a definite no on that. Good.
Has
And
to do with the power of the bike, how powerful
Okay.
it is.
And this is the last. Would you support cameras along key avenues to count car, bicycle, and other travelers on a year-round basis? Again, this is yes, no, maybe, not for, just for counting. And so that's everybody is a yes. That's great. No, you're not. Joe is not in favor of
No,
that.
I think that not every,
Oh, not everybody who
I didn't realize that those guys use technology to raise their hands. I'll do that from now on.
Oh,
Does that impact your answer, Joe? Okay, so great. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Carrie, and for the order of the final 90-second summaries.
okay. All right. And again, each candidate will have 90 seconds, and this is a random order, and we will start with Aisha Wilson.
Thank you. I really just want to thank everyone from the Cambridge Citizens Coalition and everyone who's watching here today. So my name is Aisha M. Wilson, and I'm your candidate for City Council. I am currently a Cambridge School Committee member serving in my second term, and I am running for City Council because as a school committee member, as a lifelong Cambridge resident, as a social worker, an educator, and someone who has just committed and devoted my life to our young people specifically, but to our citizens across the city, I would make a wonderful city councilor. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of things that I know. I will be able to bring voices together. I am a collaborator by nature, by heart, and everything. I really think that we have a lot of work that we need to do, but I know how to bring people to the table to get that done. I am a true believer in the work that we're doing currently in the city council, that we can get to where we need to be if we're able to work collectively. I am patient, I am thoughtful, and as a product of the Cambridge Public Schools, a product of the Cambridge Housing Authority, I know that my lived experience and my professional experience is one that will be really thoughtful while on the council. I also want to note that when elected, I would be the third Black woman to be elected to the council and the fourth woman of color. And that is just really important in a city like ours where we call ourselves super progressive, but let's look at those stats. I thank you for your time. VoteAisha.com.
Okay, thank you. Carrie Pasquarello, sorry.
Thank you. Over the course of more than a decade, I lived and worked in both Europe and Asia. And during this time, I had the opportunity to connect with a variety of diverse communities, using my diplomacy to build relationships and foster understanding. And while working at the embassy for the State Department, my focus was always on ensuring the safety and well-being of our citizens abroad, from providing emergency guidance to developing security strategies. And during my time at the embassy, I was fortunate enough to work in a number of different offices throughout the embassy. And I supported foreign service employees and their families who were living overseas. And I offered assistance with everything from housing and school to safety and connections. And so after returning home to Cambridge, I decided to use my experience with the State Department and create a platform that could help others navigate safety. And in 2014, I started my own small business, which is certified women-owned, providing threat assessment planning and focusing on health and safety and security. I care about Cambridge, and my top priorities are linked to transparency, accountability, and public safety. And the reason behind my run is because of the conversations that I've had with my neighbors and community members who feel their voices don't count. They feel excluded and disconnected. And I know we can do better, and I want to help. So please vote Carrie Pasquarello #1 and visit my website, carriecaresforcambridge.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hao Wang.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank you, Carrie, Suzanne, and Chuck for organizing this event. Thanks all the viewers for spending this time to listening to us. If I figure out how to put my how to pronounce my name into my QR code, please, if you can switch your display to the speaker mode, you would actually be able to dig everything out of internet about me. So I'm an engineer. I am apolitical in most time. I like to provide solutions and resolve any heated debates and provide solutions for all of us. I witnessed many heated debate in the past few years, and I felt that many debates are unnecessarily political. And if we know the best solution, we work together, we can solve our issues together. So I also want to play the role of a uniter. Hopefully we can have our somewhat divided city back together. And through many, what my website already outlined my platform. I care about workforce housing. I have a lot of solutions for energy and a lot of solutions for climate. I have good experience for mental health and other crises. I will work for you. Please listen to more and vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Patty Nolan.
Hello, most of you hopefully will know me because I had a background before I became your public servant, a solid background in business and nonprofit management and in public sector. That range of experience really prepared me well for this job, which I've been doing for you for a long time. So the way to think about this is, what should you want in a public servant and in a counselor? I think you want collaboration, you want principled stands, and I have a solid record of that. Everybody, however, will say that. I think what I bring that's slightly different is I always approach issues in a nuanced and thoughtful way. Again, I have a record of that there's a lot of nuance. It's been referenced, the big thing this term on Budo, the fact that we came to compromise with a far-reaching piece of legislation that got 8 votes was astonishing, and I played a key leadership role in that. So look at my record, look at the urgency and the data that I bring to every single decision. I think that also distinguishes me from most other counselors. I do know when to compromise. I do know that in order to do anything, we need to have outreach and openness. And I think if you look at my communication to people, which if you haven't, they're all clear on my website, Talk About Transparency, pattynolan.org/news. You'll see my newsletters where, unlike I think any other counselor, in advance, I say, here's something that's coming up. Even if it's controversial, I'm going to tell you exactly how I'm going to vote on it. You will not agree with me on everything I do, guaranteed. However, I think one of the reasons that I have respect across the city is that I'm honest about it, and I'm, again, bringing people together to have them understand where I stand, and I'm always something that you can count on doing that.
Thank you. John Hanratty.
Hello, thank you for the organizers for putting this all together. This was a lot of work and getting everyone together and all these great questions. So I'm looking for your #1 vote. I've lived in Cambridge for 30 years and raised my family here. My son attended public school in Cambridge and graduated last year from Ringelat, and now he's off in college, and he was well prepared for that. My career includes starting clean energy companies, cyber security companies, and bringing new products to market. So you usually start out with a big idea. It's an arduous process of going through and verifying those ideas, going out talking to customers, going out getting consensus, going out and talking to your investors, and finally you come up with the idea and you get a product that's successful. But it never looks exactly like your big idea at the beginning. You have to be able to know and measure and look at the results and understand your goals. And I'd like to bring some of that to Cambridge government. So I think some of the areas I want to work on is right now we're seeing a lot of single issue advocacy groups that are having an outweighed proportion on things. I think the council needs to weigh those out and modulate those for the needs of the community. Thank you. Vote #1.
Thank you. Frederico Muchnick, and I hope that was pronounced correctly.
So thank you. I'm running for Cambridge City Council because I want to keep democracy running. And I want the public, not the council nor the developers, to own their neighborhood. Just as with you, my neighborhood matters to me. The folks that live here, the corner store, the diner up the street, the park nearby. I want a city with unique particular street corners bars, post offices, grocery stores, bookstores, bakeries, and specific, different, and varied open spaces. A city run by small businesses that care about their particular customers, particular workers, and particular neighborhoods. And when someone has a difference with their community, instead of staying quiet about it, they can raise their voice. I want a city that's not just about the bottom line. I've dedicated my life to making films about stories I feel people should know, stories that empower us to make informed decisions. Making informed decisions applies to the job of city councilor as well, and I'm running to represent our collective hope that Cambridge retains its small town charm while continuing to develop as a city with an ever-evolving and growing population. So it's time for us, which Cambridge voted as #1 city to live in by Fortune magazine, to unite, work hand in hand. And I hope you'll take a look at federicoforcouncil.net, read our platform, consider what we are advocating, and give us your #1 or #2 vote.
Thank you, Ty. Kathy Zuzi.
Hello. Most people know me from my work at Magazine Beach Park. I've been working to revitalize it for 12 years. For my work restoring St. Augustine's African Orthodox Church, that should be completed this fall. For my work originating If This House Could Talk, where we turned Cambridgeport into an exhibit where people began to realize that they were part of the continuum of history and like their lives made a difference. And for my leadership of the Cambridgeport Neighborhood Association, I was the president for 4 years. I'm also known for my collaboration, my dogged persistence, as someone who listens, someone that connects the dots, and someone that gets things done. And that is what I hope to do for you as your city councilor. I recognize the need for affordable housing, bike lanes, and saving the planet. I think that all of us here running for council do. But the question is how to do it best, and we need to broaden the conversation. We need to stop talking at one another, but actually start having conversations about looking at other models, creatively exploring different solutions, and then having a transparent discussion of trade-offs. We should be able to add housing for people of all economic means without destroying neighborhoods, demolishing historic buildings, or sacrificing open space. And cycling must be safe. It's just got to be, and it needs to be part of a larger transportation plan. Thank you. Vote #1, Zuzi for council.
Thank you. Joe McGurk.
Hi, thank you very much to our hosts. Thanks to the 150 or so people who are watching right now. And a thank you to all of you who will watch this in the future. But I want to say thank you very much to everybody who's running for office as well. There is a certain spirit of camaraderie that happens. And if I haven't met you yet, I look forward to doing it before Election Day. We all know that it takes a lot of work, and there's a lot that goes into it. It can be, for a guy like me, it's pretty intimidating to be in a group of such accomplished and knowledgeable folks, because my path here is pretty different than everybody else's. My grandmother moved her family into Newtown Court in East Cambridge. She was an immigrant and raised 7 kids there, 6 of them, and then moved and rented a house on Antrim Street. When my father and mother got married, they moved us to Concord to give us an opportunity. I moved back as a single parent. I was a teenage dad, moved back as a single parent and started tending bar. And I've been a bartender ever since. Lower and middle income residents are essential to the well-being of our city. We perform a ton of tasks in the city in the past, and we're doing it now. They often include artists, but we have often not represented at all on our city council. And I think it's important that we have voices with that lived experience on our council. I'm an active listener as a bartender. I try to build alliances, coalitions, and collaborate with folk. I do that on a regular basis at my job. I plan to do that at City Council. So please go to joemcgurkforcambridge.com, check us out, and see if you can give me your #1 vote or #2. Thanks.
Okay. Dan Totten.
Yes, thank you. My name is Dan Totten. I'm a queer renter from Central Square, one of the only queer candidates in the race openly, and one of the only renters in the race as well. I am viable, experienced, and visionary. So viable, I had more than 100 people in the Elks Lodge at my kickoff the other night. And I'm the top fundraiser of non-incumbents at this point. Experience, I've helped write legislation. I've helped hundreds of people facing eviction and homelessness in our city get stability. And visionary, I have ideas to help low-income people like universal after school and expanding vouchers with local money, things that didn't even come up in this room. But when you talk to people, yesterday I was at St. Patrick's Place knocking on doors. When you talk to them, they don't want to talk about bike lanes. They want to talk about expanding vouchers and after school and addressing the cost of living. So I think there's a disconnect between the people in this room sometimes and the people that are actually living in low-income housing. This was the most productive council in recent memory, and I was a big part of that as a staffer to the ordinance committee. I also want to say I support gender affirming care for minors, which is something that not everybody in this room supports. And finally, I want to just acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is that so many of the candidates in this race, in fact, probably a majority of the candidates that will serve on the next council, didn't bother to show up tonight and enter this space. And I think it's because the CCC has lost credibility by continually sending out misinformation in their emails. I've factually corrected the CCC multiple times. Suzanne has acknowledged my corrections and then sent out another email with the same factual incorrection without fixing it. So I think that's unproductive, uncollaborative, and bad to have fake news in our city. It's like make Cambridge great. I don't want make Cambridge great again.
Time. Thank you. Adrienne Klein.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adrienne Klein. I'm a first-time candidate for Cambridge City Council. As you all know, I'm looking for your #1 vote on Tuesday, November 7th. I'm going to provide leadership that cares and takes action that counts. I'm running for City Council because I'm really thankful for the opportunities that Cambridge has given me thus far. I want to continue to advocate and serve in a constituent-facing role as I have been. And I'm raising my family here, so I want this to be the best city possible. It's a really unique city, as a couple of candidates have mentioned, and I have a positive vision for ways we can make it even more affordable, walkable, inclusive, and diverse. I will specifically focus on the details of how policies are implemented and communicated and coordinate with residents and businesses. So as many of you know, I've had the honor of working to support residents as a frontline contact, collaborating with agencies and departments across the city in the past 3 years. I've worked on issues from food security to education access, civic engagement to public health right here in Cambridge. And my first role in Cambridge was working to support immigrants, first generation, and students of color through the en route and college success programs. So I've helped hundreds of individuals access services here in Cambridge, including my own family. And I know the barriers that residents must overcome to get those city services that exist and what services we still need. I've drawn on my experience working internationally on public health initiatives and on government accountability, and I want to continue to help Cambridge residents.
Thank you. Robert Winters.
Hi there, everybody. I think, again, vote #1 for Robert Winters. I think the one thing everybody needs to know about me, other than the fact that I'm a teacher of mathematics, which you can probably tell from everything behind me here, is that for really several decades, I've been doing things project by project, taking things on. In many respects, becoming a candidate this year is sort of a culmination of a series of projects that I would like to be a part of. Whether it was helping get the recycling program together back in the late 80s. I was essentially the composting program for the city for a decade. I was involved in getting the computerization of the Cambridge elections. Perhaps most people know me for having, for the last quarter century, been the principal writer for the Cambridge Civic Journal. 20 years ago now, I actually started the Cambridge candidate pages to actually help voters become informed about candidates. And that had became very much the primary place people would actually go to find out about candidates. I still serve on the Central Square Advisory Committee, and I do so with a passion. I also run a television show, again, same background you're seeing right here, called Cambridge Inside Out. We've done nearly 600 episodes of that program. I really believe in growing a civic culture and in education and information. And the #1 big topic that I really want to be a part of is the discussion about any possible changes to the city charter. I just want to make that really, really clear that I want to be a part of that discussion.
Thank you. The Reverend Vernon Walker.
Yes, I want to thank CCC for hosting this forum. I want to thank fellow candidates for being a part of this forum. And I also want to thank the audience, Lottie Dottie and everybody, for being a part of this and sitting through this conversation. I am running because climate change is the greatest existential threat to our existence. We know that Cambridge is vulnerable to extreme weather such as flooding from sea level rise. And storm surges. We also know that climate change is a threat to public health, and I'm concerned that if we don't create policies that help promote climate resilience, people will suffer. We know that that several neighborhoods in Cambridge suffer deeply from the urban heat island effect. I'm also running because the most marginalized voices have been excluded from the council. I'm a renter running here in Cambridge, and I'm also an African American man. Currently, the city is 10.6% Black, but we don't have any African American men on the council. And I think equitable representation matters. I'm also running because of not only my background, serving as the director of the community responding for extreme weather for over 4 years, I have a background in helping prepare underserved communities such as Dorchester, Mattapan, and Brockton for extreme heat. And I'm running to bring this same experience to the council. So if you want to check out our website, votevernon.org. And you will find much more information about me. And don't forget to vote Vernon #1. Thank you.
Doug Brown.
Yeah, first, I'm Doug Brown. I wanted to start by just thanking all the neighborhood associations that were involved in putting this together. I've been involved with neighborhood issues for the last decade, and I really do think that neighborhoods matter and that neighborhood associations play an important role in voicing community concerns. I've been, over that 10 years, involved in a lot of different issues: climate resiliency, zoning reform, good government efforts, and even housing policy, as well as transportation and mobility. But I think for me, as a dad, a stay-at-home dad of 3 kids, the things that resonate for me most are what we're doing for families. There's been a lot of research over the last few years that families, particularly middle-income families, have really been hollowed out in Cambridge over the last 5 to 10 years. And some of those issues that cause that are big, from housing costs, especially middle-income housing costs, or even after-school options, as Dan mentioned, which really make it hard for people to work fully, and safe streets, which has been a big issue of late. And sometimes it's even as little an issue as whether we have a public toilet available or a water fountain in every public park. I think ultimately the last 5 years have been a very divisive time in America. And what I would like to see going forward is more new ideas from the council, but also less division from the council. I think we need to make progress, but we also need to make sure we don't lose creativity or neglect community input in that process. So I hope I'll have your vote.
Thank you. Paul Toner.
Hi, first of all, please vote Paul Toner #1 for City Council. Just for those of you who don't know me, a little background history. I'm a lifelong Cambridge resident, and I'm proud to live in my great-grandparents' house. And my children, who just recently graduated from Cambridge Latin High School, are 5th-generation Cantabrigians. And I say all of that not because to be exclusionary, it's because I'm very proud of my history in Cambridge and my family's history in Cambridge. But I also recognize Cambridge is a constantly changing city, and we need to be working together as a community, making progress, while at the same time recognizing and appreciating our history and the traditions of Cambridge. So I don't want to make Cambridge great again. I want Cambridge to be all it can be going forward. And I want to work with a collaborative city council. And I believe I've been someone who is about common sense leadership and have a solutions-oriented mentality. I want to fix problems, not create problems. And I want to work together. And I'm hoping that I will be reelected, and then I'll be elected with 8 other councilors who want to work together on the actual problems that the people of Cambridge say they want us to focus on, and not constantly be bringing in new individual ideas. I think part of the problem with the Cambridge City Council right now is we have 9 councilors with 9 separate agendas. And I hope that the new council will come together and work together on a common focused agenda. Toner #1. Thank you.
Thank you. And Joan Pickett.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joan Pickett, and I do want to thank the sponsors of this organizing event. I think it's really important for the public to hear from the candidates, and I want to thank the candidates that are running, because it shows you really care about the future of the city. And I chose to run for city council because I believe Cambridge residents and businesses deserve a better government. And I will bring to the council a better approach to governing, and I'll bring my background and experience, which I think is somewhat unique. I will be out in the community and listening, but also communicating back what I'm hearing. What I hear from residents and businesses will become the center of policy decisions. It's also important to frame issues with facts and data and analysis, and to make sure we really understand unintended consequences before we enact policies. It's also very important to me that the city promotes fiscal transparency and accountability in its budgeting and is responsible in its spending. And I'm the right choice for your #1 vote because of how I will approach the issues and because I bring extensive community experience with organizations such as the Mid-Cambridge Neighborhood Association and others. So I understand how to collaborate, how to bring people together, and how to compromise. And my professional experience in planning and
Thank you. At this point, I would like to also take a moment to thank all of the candidates who chose to participate tonight, including the 2 incumbents. Public dialogue and discourse done in a respectful manner is certainly something that I think this forum and others I've attended really speak to that nature. This is, of course, a nonpartisan election for City Council, and it also uses ranked choice voting in a somewhat unique Cambridge form, but nonetheless. So I think it's an exciting time as a city like Boston, where I happen to live, you didn't notice the accent, really is moving forward, and we have to meet those challenges and opportunities together. And thank you to each of the candidates, because yes, it costs money, but it also costs time and family time and emotional energy and things that are not something we can put a dollar sign on. And so I, as president of Boston League of Women Voters, I certainly thank all of you who have put yourself forward to run for public office. And again, reminding all voters that it is not a spectator sport. Join the team and go and vote. And thank you all. And I'm now going to turn it over to Chuck, who is going to just remind us again of the co-sponsors of this event, as well as how citizens and candidates will be able to view this forum. And again, it was my pleasure to join you once again for the 2nd annual Cambridge Forum. And thank you all.
Again, thank you all for coming, the 16 candidates and the 160 plus people that we had at one point joining us. This year's event, again, is being co-sponsored by the Cambridge Citizens Coalition, Cambridge Voters for Good Government, Cambridge Streets for All, Individual Cambridge, and the East Cambridge Planning Team, which I am president, the Harvard Square Neighborhood Association, and the Mid-Cambridge Neighborhood Association. Thank you all for coming. We will have this has been recorded, and we will post this recording for everyone to look at, and we're also going to give it to CCTV to broadcast. So again, thank you for coming, and
thank you, and thank
great
you,
work,
Carrie.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Good night.
you.
See you on the campaign trail.
Thank you
Thank-
all.
good
Thanks,
night.
thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.